Okay, today we're going to talk about some of my teaching experiences. Uh, like I say, they went over and I started at St. Alice with the 51st first graders. And I'd only been there about a month, and it was time for parent teachers conference. I had 50 kids, so I think there must have been at least 50 parents there that night. When I went down the hall, I heard this mother say, "We might as well be behind the Iron Curtain for all we're going to find out tonight." And I know when she came in that I heard what she said. So she came in and she sat down, and her son's name was Lenny, and I didn't know her personally. And anyway, we went through the files, and I asked her, I said, and he was a good student. And I asked her, has he did any complaining about anything at home? And she said, oh no. She said, no, he likes school. And I said, well, do you have any questions? And she said, no, I can't think of any. And I said, well, I said, if you ever have any questions, or if you want to visit class, I said, feel welcome. You can come anytime. So anyway, the conference went really well, and so did all the rest of them. We had good parents. Okay, that year, uh, Linda was right across the hall. I think I've told you about this before. And she had a teacher that was a nun. And one day, the kid, we were having reading class. It was a quiet room, and all at once the door on the west side of the room opened, and the nun comes up, just stepping in real fast, and about 5 steps behind her came Linda. And she went down the aisle between some of the kids, and I said, Linda, what's going on? And she said, she took my cookie or a cupcake, I can't remember what it was. And that's all she said, and right on out the door the two of them went. And I thought, oh no, Linda had a pretty mean crutch, as you several can testify for. So anyway, I guess when they got outside the door, and I saw the teacher at lunch break, and I said, what's this between you and Linda? I said, do I need to apologize for my daughter? And she laughed, and she said, no. She said, Linda always works so hard and so quiet, and she said, she's kind of by herself. She said she does have she does have friends, but they kind of treat Linda kind of like she's kind of fragile. And I was going down the aisle, and I just thought, I'll see if I take that cupcake, what kind of response I'll get. Well, she put the cupcake or cookie in her pocket, and she said, I was surprised how quick Linda could bend over, pick up them crutches, and start after me. And so she said, I thought, well, this is going to be fun. So she said, I went down the hall, down the aisle, across the hall into your room, and down the aisle. And she said, when we got back in front of the room, she said, I stopped. And I told Linda, I said, I'll give you back your cookie or cupcake. This was just a game that we were playing. Linda said, yeah, I know. Well, I don't know how far Linda would have went. But anyhow, Sister told me, she says, I think the kids in the room have a different opinion of Linda now. So this was one of the things that happened. Another time I went into substitute form, and these kids were in the hall, and I heard this girl say, well, we got a mother for a teacher today, she said, so we're not going to have to do much. We'll have an easy day. So we went in, and I introduced myself, and I said, if we can't find enough work that your teacher left for us, I'm sure I can find a lot more work for us to do. And then I called this girl by name, and I said, And if you want to talk to Sister Superior, who was pretty strict with the kids, you can at your recess, you can go in and talk to her about having a mother for your teacher. Well, that kind of took the wind out of her. Okay, and in the meantime, Aunt Nancy, this will be about Nancy when she was, I think, sixth graders. And I think there were about 35 kids in that class. And it was a good class and a close class. And when Nancy didn't come out to get in the car after school, I thought, well, I'll go in and see what's keeping her. And one of the girls in that room opened the door, and she opened the door and she said, Nancy can't come out. She said, Mr., and I don't remember what the teacher's name is, Mr. So-and-so is having a spaz attack, and he's keeping us all in. And there was a teacher in the hall, and I said, what's going on in there? And she said, I don't know what started it, but they dumped each other's desks. She said, I don't know whether they dumped their own or whether they dumped each other, but all the desks are dumped and all the stuff's mixed up on the floor. So they've got to sort all this stuff and get their desks back in order before they're excused. And I don't know if they lost any recess time or what caused it. And when Nancy got in the car, I said, what's this all about? And she said, well, I don't really know what started it. But she said, first thing you know, everybody's desk was dumped. And Nancy never said she dumped any desks, but I kind of imagine she did. And so it was at the beginning of the year, my sister Rita called and she said, it was about the end of the week. She said, could you substitute tomorrow? And I said, yeah, I'll come in. So I stopped by the office when I went in, and she said, you're not going to be teaching today. You're going to be observing. She said, I don't think things are going right in that room. And she said, I've already told the teacher that you'll be in and be observing some of the kids. She said, which is the truth. But she said, if the kids do anything, she said, I don't want you to correct them. I just want you to watch what's going on. So I went in and I had a notepad to take notes and so on. And the first thing I noticed is this old trick where you drop your pencil and when you set up, you throw the paper wad. Okay, that was one of the things. And another thing, why they started the blind trick up and down, and there's a whole bunch of windows along there. So there was about 4 or 5 kids involved in this. One wanted to put a blind up and a little bit, the next one would go down. And at first they kind of watched me, and when they found out I wasn't going to say anything, boy, they really started having fun. And you would not believe, and I can't see how she didn't know, paper wads just flew like crazy. And I never said a thing. And after school was out, why, I went up and she had before she put this list of words, she had a medical dictionary in there, and she put a list of words, and I didn't even know what some of the terminology was. And I said, what kind of it was a health class they had. I said, health class was kind of different today. And she said, yeah, I thought the kids needed to know that. Well, she went on out of the room, and I looked at this health book she brought over, and it had some high school name in it. And that's what she had used most of the week, I guess, was this health book. And the custodian, who I knew real well, Joe Beveridge, and his son was one of Mike's closest friends, and he started sweeping the floor, and he brought in it was a tin wastepaper basket, and he said, just look at this. He said, I could use a scoop shovel and pick up these paper wads. And honestly, the paper was in the bottom of that waste paper basket was at least 2 inches deep. And Joe said, and it's been like this all week. So on the way out, my sister stopped me and she said, well, what's your opinion? I said, I don't have any opinion. I said, I'll just tell you what I observed. So I told her about what the kids had done, and I said, never corrected her, never said anything. And then I told her about the health book. And I said, but it isn't my place to make any opinion. Well, she said, okay, thank you. Well, on Monday, they had a different teacher in there. Okay, now we'll get back to the kids. After Nancy, there was Michael. And the first year, I think Michael was in the second or third grade, I think. Third grade when things started happening. Well, they had this nun, and I kind of agree with Mike. She shouldn't have been teaching. I think she had some health problems. But anyway, Michael's friend was sitting in front of him or behind him. I don't remember which. But anyhow, they were whispering, and I can't remember what his first name was. His last name was Peterson. Anyhow, he called Mike a hairy mouse. And of course, Michael had to laugh. Well, sister come over, grabbed him by the arm, and Michael said, and she hit me. I don't think she hit him very hard, but anyway, he got hit. Well, it wasn't too much longer till she saw me in the hall one day and she said, you better have your teacher get on to that Michael. And I said, why? What's he done? And what's he done now? And she said, nothing, but he might. And so that was the kind of a class Michael had that year. The next was Bill. And Bill, I don't know, I guess he laughed at something. Why Bill laughed or what, I don't know. But anyway, he got kicked out of the room. And I don't know whether he had to go down and sit by Nancy or whether he sat in the office all day. And anyhow, when he came out to the car, why, he told me that he'd laughed at school and a teacher made him leave leave the room all day. And so we went home and I said, when am I supposed to come in? And he said, well, she didn't say. And Kenny just got home from work and I told him what happened to Bill. I said, I'm going over and talk to that nun right now. He knew I was a little upset. And so he said, I think I better go with you. So we went over and they answered the door and they were real friendly. And I said, well, I want to talk to Sister so-and-so. Well, come on in. Well, at that time, I think there were 5 nuns there. So we all went in the front room and I called her by name. I said, I want to talk to you about Bill today. I said, I understand that he had to leave the room today because he laughed. And she said, yes. I said, you mean Bill lost a half a day of school because a 7-year-old laughed? Well, she said, I heard it was kind of a rough class and I wanted to get my rules set straight. And I said, I think you could have set him in the hall or you could have corrected him or something, or took him out for a little while. But he missed a half a day of school because he laughed. And his first grade teacher was there. She was a nun. And so I said, Sister Roberta Ann, did you have any trouble with Bill last year? She said, no, not a bit. So and Kenny was trying to get me to be quiet. He was poking me. Oh. I told this nun, I said, I want to know if there's a personality complex between the two of you. If there is, he'll be at public school in the morning. Oh, They did not want to hear this. Oh, no, no, something like that. Well, after that, there was no problem with either one of them anymore. And then there was Bobby. And to me, Bobby was always pretty quiet at school, I thought. And I had said once in this librarian told me, she said, Bobby is a good boy, but he talks too much. Well, I was kind of glad that he was talking because I thought he was too quiet, and his teacher told me that Bob was quiet, and then this was a librarian. And so on the way out from school, I looked out the window, and there was Bobby and 3 or 4 of his friends running around this librarian teacher. She was just learning to drive, and she was probably going about 3 miles an hour. And they were running around her car. Well, she couldn't have went any faster if she wanted to. And of course, that only happened once, as far as I know. I don't know how many times they done it. But anyhow, that was most of my experiences at St. Alice. And then I was subbing at a school, 6th graders. And the bus had come in, and the kids had gone in the cloakroom, and of course they saw me, and they knew a substitute was there. Well, there was 5 of these boys, and I heard them, and they were making plans for the day. We'll do this, or we'll do that, or just wait till Ray gets here. And they kept saying, wait till Ray gets here. Well, when the next bus drove up, these boys ran out the door and met Ray coming in. And he come in, and I can imagine what they were saying. The substitute will do so-and-so. Well, they just stepped in, 3 or 4 steps. And all at once, Ray stopped dead, took off his hat, and bowed and said, good morning, Mrs. Anderson. Now, these boys were standing crossways like that. And I know if I'd have been standing by Ray, I could have just pushed him over like dominoes. They were shocked. And Ray walked right on in the cloakroom. And I don't know whether he gave any instructions or what, but anyhow, I had a really good day. At the end of this day, right when the first bell rang, I said, I want you to know I always leave a report for the teacher and what was done today and so on. And I'm able to give a real good report about all of you. And I said, Ray, I want to thank you for the influence you have over your friends. And he thanked me, and he went out and got in the car or got in the bus. And then the other kids were waiting for the next bell to ring. So I called I said, I'd like to talk to you. And 5 boys, they come up around the desk, and I said, I heard you making plans this morning, but I want to tell you, your plans might not have worked, because I said, I've substituted a lot for your principal, and he's a pretty good friend. And if you couldn't have handled it being in my room, I said, you wouldn't have been here. You'd have been down to see Mr. So-and-so, and possibly you'd have been placed in a lower grade, or I know that he wouldn't want you in the office all day, and you couldn't handle it in this room, so you just might have been sent home. Well, they didn't like to hear that. I said, and you know what? I may be in this room quite a bit this year, so you might just think about your plans and what Ray has to tell you if I'm in here again. And I was in that room a lot this year, and those boys were fine after that day. Okay, another time was when I was teaching, and this I didn't like. They have a workroom between the 2 classrooms, and the teacher in the other room, she asked me, she said, will you come back in after you eat your lunch? I want you to be a witness. Well, at first I didn't know what a witness meant. So when I went in, we went back in the teacher's workroom, and this boy, I imagine, was probably a fifth grader. And she told him, she said, bend over and grab your ankles. And she took a paddle, and it was a big paddle, about this long. And she gave him, 4 or 5 swats, I think as hard as she could hit. The boy never made a sound. And after she was through with her paddling, why, she told me, thank you. And that's all she said. Well, I never saw that boy, but on the way out, I stopped to the principal who I also taught for quite a lot. And I told him, I said, Mr. Austin, I said, and I told him that she'd asked me to be a witness. I said, I won't do that again. I said, because I don't know what that boy done, whether he deserved it or what he didn't. And she never explained to me before or after what the swats were for. But I said, she really hit him. And I said, I'm against this. So I said, I won't be a witness again. He said, that's okay. He said, you won't have to. And he said, that don't happen very often, but it is allowed. Well, of course, it isn't allowed now. But she really swatted him. And then one day, I was up here at Centennial, and there was a little first grade girl, and she was Mexican, and her folks talked Spanish. They couldn't talk any English at all. And she came in, and why they let her, I don't know. But this little girl roamed all over school. I mean, if she decided to leave class, why, she just went out of the classroom and they let her go. Well, the day that I was there, she wanted to show and tell. And she kept coming up to the desk and telling me, I want to share. I want to show and tell. And I said, well, when it's time, why, I'll call you. And I don't know how many times she come up. And anyway, I turned around and she was there, and I just gave her a little spank. It's like that. I said, you go back and sit down, and when we do it, I'll call you. She went back, she sat down, she never went out of the classroom all day. So after school was out, I got to thinking, uh-oh. So I went down and I had talked for this principal quite a bit too, and I told him, I said, I may be in trouble. And I told him what I done. And he said, well, it kind of sounds like she deserved it. And he said, I don't know why they're letting her walk all over the school. But he says, I've seen her walking up and down the halls. And he said, another thing, her folks don't speak any English. So she may not tell them. And if she does, we can't understand what they say. Well, that never developed any farther. And then another time in Centennial, this was kind of a boy. He was kind of special ed, and I knew the teacher had quite a bit of trouble with him. And when school started, he did answer roll, but then he went back and he climbed underneath a table, and he just sat there. And I thought, well, if he's sitting under that table, he's not going to be causing any room. And I just let him sit under the table. And when the principal came in, why, there he was sitting. He usually checked in every morning to see how everything was going. He said, what's he doing under the table? I said, well, he wouldn't have sat under the table today. So I just let him sit. And he said, well, good for you. So when his teacher came back and I was in there for somebody else, I told her what I'd done. And she said, that was okay. But she said, let me tell you what happened to me. She said, I was reading a story to him, and she said, or to the kids, and I wasn't paying any attention. and he took out his scissors and he cut out the whole front of his T-shirt. I said, well, I'm glad that happened to you rather than me. So, what was there? Was another, oh, was it another one? I taught kindergarten over for a maternity leave for a teacher I knew, and it was kindergarten, and I think that I had about 16 kids, but we got to divide them in 4 different groups. So I didn't, you could give a lot of time to each one. Well, there was a little Marcia there, and she was kind of an outspoken little girl. And one day the kids, I'd excused them for them to go find whatever their next thing they were going to do. She was sitting there and she started running her fingers up my arm like that. And I thought, oh, Marcia wants to tell me something. She was sitting there and she said, you know what? And I, what? My folks sleep naked. She said, what do you think about that? I said, well, I wanted to laugh, and I knew I didn't dare laugh. And I said, well, I guess if they want to, that's all right. She said, huh. So went back and slammed herself in her chair. And Marcia and I, we got along good. One day, it was after school, and they got out at noon, and or 1 o'clock, and she looked out the window. I walked the kids. They had to walk across a back field, kind of. It wasn't the playground. It was kind of grassy, and it was quite a little walk over there. But anyhow, she looked out the window, and she said, there's that red car. And she said, I don't like that car. I'm not going to go get in. I said, oh, your dad's out there waiting. She said, yeah, but I hate that car. I said, well, let me walk across the field with you, because I said, you told me that you were going to go see your grandma, spend the afternoon with her, and she'll go out to see you. Well, she went with me. She took my hand, and we walked across the field, but she didn't do any hurrying. And both of her folks were professional people. Her mother was a lawyer, and I don't know what her dad did, but he was a businessman. Anyway, he stopped there at the gate. There was a wire across, and the kids would duck under the wire and go get in the car. Well, he stood there and was talking to me a minute, and Marcia went ahead and got in the car. Well, when Dad went to get in the car, Marcia had locked both doors and wouldn't let him in. And Marcia unlocked this door. Well, Marcia was not unlocking the door, and she was over on the passenger side, and he had left the keys in the car, so he didn't have the key, and she wasn't letting him in. And this went on probably 10 minutes anyway, and I went over to the car and I said, well, let me talk to her. Maybe she'll listen to me. And he was pretty irate. And Marcia had got off of the front seat and was sitting down on the floorboard. She was just sitting there. And I said, Marcia, I said, I thought you were going to go see your grandma this afternoon. She didn't answer, and I said, she's going to be waiting. And she sat there a little while, and the dad was still hollering at her. I said, I'm sure you're going to go straight down to your grandma's and things will be all right. So she got up and she let him in. He just zoomed out of that car. And the next morning, her mom brought her in the room, and she never said anything, and Marcia never said anything, and that was the end of it. So what that was all about, I have no idea. And then Eugene teachers went on strike. And the substitutes were really, really put in a spot because we all got letters that said that we were registered substitutes. And if we were called and failed to show up, we would no longer be were considered a substitute. And at that time, most of the calls were from requests. And if they weren't requested by it was I guess the school office did the calling. And so we knew if we did go, they weren't going to be requesting it. So the neighbor girl, she was teaching, and so we talked about it, and we thought, well, we'll go out the first day of the strike and see what it's all about. If it had been Springfield schools, I wouldn't have even went out or even thought about it. And I talked to Kenny, and he said, well, it's up to you. You could do as you like. So anyway, Sue and I went out there, and if the teachers and pickets had been a little different, we probably would never have taught, but we just barely got out of the car, and they had to stay at least 5 feet away from us. And oh, they were screaming and yelling and having their place case, so we never even stopped. We just went straight on in. And I was lucky. I was assigned a 3rd grade classroom, and the teacher that taught that, she couldn't walk the picket line because she was going to retire that year, and if she'd walked the picket line, I don't know whether it was her salary or whether she couldn't or what, but anyway, she didn't. She didn't walk the picket line. And they had to leave us 2 days. I think there was a list of the kids and names, and either 1, maybe 2 days of planning, and that was it. Well, like I say, I got a 3rd grade, and it was a good class. And we were there, well, it lasted almost 2 weeks. And by that time, I had the kids all tested in reading groups and so on, and everything was going fine. Well, it was towards the end of they were talking of the teachers coming back in, and the principal come in the office, and he said, will you go out and bring your kids in? And I said, why? Where are my kids? And he said, they're out there. They got a picket line of their own. And I went out there, and there these kids, the pickets were on one side of the fence, and there my class was going down the other side. They were saying, we don't want the strike to end. We want to keep Mrs. Anderson. And I just stopped, and I went over. I said, hey, you kids can't do this. They said, well, we don't want the strike to end. And of course, they had a good teachers right beside him. And I said, well, you can't do this or you're going to be in big trouble. So they did. They went over to the other playground, and I know that did not suit very good. Well, my car wasn't bothered at all, but the air was let out of the tires of some of them, and some of the cars had been keyed and so on. And I think that only lasted once or twice because the principal went out and told him that any damage that was done to the cars would come out of their first paychecks. So I was left all right. Well, the last day we taught, why, and we just stopped taking our cars out there anyway, and the bus would take us from the school office out. And the strike wasn't clear over, but when we went out, why, the teacher said, we won't yell at you or anything today. We just want to talk to you. And I never said a word. And the teacher and Sue that was with me, she said, you had your chance the first day. She said, we come out here just to see what was going on. And this is the way that we were treated. Well, we know when there's strikes how it goes. So anyway, when we subbed in there, and I did a few times that year, but the teachers were pretty cool, all except the one that I had subbed for. And I got a real nice letter from her and from the kids. And whenever she needed a teacher that year or substitute, I got to sub in that room. And I think she appreciated what I done, and evidently everything all right with her, because after that year I never seen her again. But that school, the teachers, I don't know, they were most of the schools were okay, but for some reason that one was a little bit different. If you taught for a beginner teacher, it was kind of like, you might have my job. And if you taught for an older teacher, why, they couldn't be bothered. And the principal, he was really nice, though. And he'd always walk you down to the hall. And I'd had a class one day, and they opened a sliding door between my room and the room next door. And when they opened it, they said the flags flew together. And then they changed rooms. It was reading, and some of the kids went to that room, and some come to my room. The door was closed. And the next morning, the same thing. And the teacher never come in, never talked to me at all. On the third day, she came over, and she said, "Oh, by the way," she said, "if you need any help finding anything, or if you need anything, why," she said, "I'll help you." And I said, "Well, I've been here 3 days, and if I haven't found it by now, I don't need it." And I know that was kind of rude, but anyway, I said it. So anyway, that was the end of that, and that was about the end of my teaching at that time. I did teach all the elementary schools in Springfield, all the junior highs, and I taught, I think, all of them in Springfield, and I taught the 3 Catholic schools. So I taught my first when I was 18, and I was in the classroom when I was 81 years old, and then I tutored. And some of these boys that I'd had when I taught, I forgot to say, I did substitute a lot at St. Alice, and then I went for maternity 6 weeks, and then in about a month, another teacher was taking a maternity leave, so I would be there another, or I said 6 months, 6 weeks. And so at the end of the first 6 weeks, I had a third grade room, and so I went in, and the principal said, "Margie's not coming back." She said, "You've got a choice to make." She said, "You can either teach the rest of the year if you want to, or if you don't want to teach, then you can have Debbie's room and have your another 6 weeks." So he said, "You decide what you want to do." And so, of course, I stayed for the year, and that was the starting of the next 7 years I taught there at St. Alice. The last year I taught was one that a teacher should retire on, and that's when they closed the school. I had 12 kids, 6 boys, 6 girls, and it was an advanced class, all except 2 that needed some help. And at this time, I had a friend for probably the last 3 years I taught there, and she didn't have anything to do, so one day I said, "Why don't you come down and be my aide?" And she said, "Well, can I do that?" And I said, "Well, I'll ask the principal. I don't know why you can't." So she did. So for 3 years she came down, and I had an aide, probably the only one there. But she did run things off for me and grade papers, and she was just coming in the afternoon, so she was only there about 2 hours. And the teachers, I think, were a little bit wanted her to do things for him. Sometimes she would run things off, but most of the time she wouldn't. And I didn't mention either, Bill was going to college. And what do you, well, I want to say? Computers had just started to come out. And so Bill said, well, if they could do it, why, he'd come out and he'd teach the kids on the computer. They'd teach them spelling. And so we got that okayed. So once a week he'd come out and he'd have time for about 4 kids. And the kids liked that. They called him Mr. Bill Spelling. And he was out there till, quite a long time. I don't know, a couple, 3 months maybe. And so we done that. And then, like I started to say before, it was towards the end of school. And the kids had done real well, so I took them over to the Willamette Lane Park, and we'd done this before. They'd eat lunch over there, and they'd have their playground over there and be back at school by 1. Well, this day, it was just about the end of school, so we'd planned to go over, and same thing again, they'd play there. Well, that day, the kids keep saying, well, isn't it time to go back? And we're ready to go back, and so on like this. Well, finally, Florence and I said, oh, okay, we'll go back. And she led him in, and I brought up the inn. We went in the principal's office, and we stopped right when we got inside the door because the secretary came out. And she said, I want to talk to you a minute. And she came out, and she just made small talk. You did this, and how was the day, and so on. And Florence said, I'll take the kids on down and start reading them a story if I need to. And I said, okay, I'll be right there. And we talked a little bit to the secretary, and as I started to leave, the principal come out. And I never thought any about it. Well, how was your day over there? And I said, well, the kids for some reason were kind of restless. I don't know. And I talked, and I said, I got to get back to that classroom. And so when I went, why, he followed me down the hall. And when I went in, I think there were 3 or 4 mothers there. And I don't know for sure whether it was a surprise for my birthday because the kids knew it was in July, or whether it was the end of the term. But anyway, when I walked in, why, the mothers had cleared off my desk, put a white tablecloth on, and they had a cake and ice cream sitting on one side. But more than that, there was 2 bouquets, 12 dozen red roses in each one from the parents and one from the kids. And they fixed the kids in a circle, and each one, and they had my chair there and a little chair in front, and each kid would come around, and before they put the roses there, they took the roses out of the bouquet, and each one of these kids would hand me a rose and then say something. I can't remember what kind of beer they had or what they thought or whatever. And of course, they had a movie camera going the whole time, and the principal come in, and he just stood there, and he said, were you a little bit surprised? A little bit surprised? Well, of course I was. And it was pretty emotional afternoon after that. And the kids of course, didn't have any studies or anything the rest of the day. They played some games, and the mothers had the afternoon all planned and so on. So that was kind of the end of my teaching. And like I say, I tutored then for, I think the last tutoring I was probably 90 maybe. Some of it I done just to help out, and the ones that I tutored before, they came back, and one father came over. He had a 7th grade girl, and no, a 6th grade girl. I had her first, and he said she needs some help, and I said, well, I'd let my certificate go, and he said, I don't care about a piece of paper. I just want her to have somebody to help her. Well, she was a granddaughter of a close friend of mine, so they come in, and her biggest problem was that she wouldn't do her homework. So I'd sit there and listen to her do her homework, and maybe we'd do a little bit of what was going to be the next day. Well, I imagine I had her, maybe a couple or 3 months, and that was all she needed. Her grades were brought up, and I think the main thing was somebody sat right beside her, and her folks had been were divorced. She's been a week with one and then a week with the other, and she was just kind of caught in the middle. And so I had her. So.
Slap her down again, paw, slap her down again. Make her tell us more, paw, tell us where she's been. We don't want our neighbors talking about our kin. Slap her down again, paw, slap her down again.
Unquote.
Do-si-do. Boy, that's hot stuff, ain't it?